I just got the word from our outgoing Dean of Faculty, Stephanie Wilbank. She looked at me, she said, keep it short, Tom. Always good recommendation as an attorney. So I'm going to turn the podium over first to John Miller. John is our head of admissions and enrollment, also includes marketing component. And John will explain why this year we have a larger tent than last year. John Miller.
Good morning. As G. McHenry said, I'm John Miller. I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management here at the law school. So let me welcome you to Vermont Law School, and we're really glad you're here. So for most of you, traveling to South Royalton has been quite the journey, and it's probably in stark contrast to where you came from. You've traveled all over the country, and for many of you, all over the globe, to embark on your next chapter today in South Royalton. And now, throughout the admissions process, you began to learn a little bit more about Vermont Law School. Like South Royalton is not a city. The law school is, in fact, not in Burlington. But you learned a lot about our mission and our culture, and that, Vermont Law School is a law and graduate school committed to changing the world. This small rural school has a national reputation and global connections. And as you sit here embraced by our beautiful green mountains along our wonderful White River, know that you're joining a community of advocates and leaders who are ready to share their knowledge with you, their wisdom, and more importantly, their network of opportunities to help you succeed. And wisdom is a two-way street, and each of you brings a unique set of experiences, associations, and perspectives, and you're going to share those with us and help us grow and evolve as an institution and individually and professionally. And while your educational careers, work experiences, and personal narratives are different, there is a common thread among all of you, which is a passion and dedication to serve your neighbor, your community, and a desire to make a difference in this world. So the best part of what I do up here is to tell the community a little bit about all of you. And if you do hear something you like, you are welcome to make some noise. So in total, there are 279 new students. That's 198 JD students. 60 master's students, 13 LLM students, and 8 exchange students from Canada, Italy, and France. You represent 39 states and 11 different countries. So our top states this year: Vermont, New York, Massachusetts, California, Texas, Pennsylvania, Colorado, Connecticut, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Maine, Virginia, Maryland, Florida, Illinois, North Carolina, Minnesota, South Carolina. And we also have several students from Washington, Rhode Island, Ohio, Puerto Rico, Tennessee, Wisconsin, Washington, D.C., Michigan, Kansas, Georgia, Utah, Mississippi. So as for our countries this year, I already mentioned France, Italy, and Canada, but we also have students from China, Kenya, Ghana, Israel, Uganda, South Korea, Peru, and Russia. You represent over 200 different undergraduate institutions. We have several students from University of Vermont, University of Colorado Boulder, those are our top 2 this year, UMass Amherst, SUNY Geneseo, University of Connecticut, Colby Sawyer, St. Lawrence, UT Austin, Ithaca College, Plymouth State, Cal State, Castleton College, University of Delaware, University of Maryland, DePaul, Seton Hall, Harvard University, University of Florida, Middlebury College, University of Minnesota, Mount Holyoke College, University of Wisconsin-Madison, NYU, University of Maine, SUNY Albany, Rutgers, Brown, Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, Penn State, UCLA, Norwich, Boston College, University of Virginia, New Mexico State University, Hampshire College, Green Mountain College, University of Southern Mississippi, and University of Georgia. Okay, so our top undergraduate majors this year, it's always a race between political science and environmental science. Last year, political science won. This year, environmental science takes it. Following environmental science and political science, we have biology, philosophy, economics, liberal arts, psychology, English, sociology, natural sciences, criminal justice, communications, history, anthropology, social work, geology, and zoology. You also happen to be very interesting people with a variety of professional experience and especially environmental experience. You've been solar field technicians, installers, consultants, environmental educators, environmental consultants, field researchers, lead inspectors. You've worked with endangered species management and wildlife rehabilitation. You've tested for water quality and emissions. You've been geoscientists, ecologists, and biologists. You've worked for the Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, Greenpeace, the EPA, Department of Interior, National Park Service, National Science Foundation, NOAA, and USAID. You've been livestock managers, farm and ranch hands, park and river stewards, and the list goes on and on. We have many people who have worked as professional paralegals and legal assistants. You are math teachers, science teachers, English teachers, camp counselors. You've worked in retail, everything from an associate to a store manager. You've worked in art galleries, you're contractors, carpenters, bartenders, servers, cooks, and we have a pastry chef. Many of you have worked in media and public relations. You're writers, editors, journalists, radio producers, film producers. One of you has worked as the lighting director for the Monkees. A lot of you have experience with coffee, and that pairs well with graduate school. And one of you, in fact, is a certified coffee sensory professional. You've worked on political campaigns. You've been field organizers, canvassers, and you've worked or interned for candidates such as Senator Elizabeth Warren, Congressman Peter Welch, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and Senator Tammy Duckworth, among others. You've interned for various law firms, judges, prosecutors, and public defenders all over the nation. And several of you have dedicated your careers to helping children and families. We have social workers, you've worked for Child Protective Services, we have family therapists, court-appointed advocates, and one of you is a behavioral therapist for autistic children. Many of you have executive experience, business owners. You've been executive directors of nonprofits. You've been chief of staff, CEOs, directors, and project managers for a variety of different organizations. We have a professional poker player described as the top 1% of all players in the world. Try to find that person. Several of you have criminal justice experience. You've worked as jail administrators, private investigators. You've been correctional officers and police officers. We have a small plane pilot and a helicopter pilot. Many of you have military experience, and with this class, we represent the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Navy, and the National Guard. And we thank you for your service. You also dedicate your time to worthwhile causes. Your tutors, your mentors, your translators, your coaches. You've been Democratic delegates. Many of you have done alternative spring break to help rebuild homes and provide food to the homeless. You volunteer in soup kitchens, for Meals on Wheels, and for food banks. You are active on your college campuses, holding leadership roles in fraternities and sororities, admissions offices. Talk to me afterwards. You are resident advisors and research assistants. You are presidents and vice presidents of student groups such as pre-law societies, college Democrats, student senate, new student orientation, Sean Dean Jefferson. And my favorite, we need this, president of the Maple Sugaring Club. You are EMTs, lifeguards, firefighters, you've served in AmeriCorps and Peace Corps, and you volunteered in local prisons. So you're an extremely active bunch. We have skiers, snowboarders, hikers, mountain bikers, scuba divers. You've done varsity, crew, lacrosse, hockey, baseball, basketball, football, and soccer. We have rowers, golfers, runners, dancers, polo players, tennis players, ping pong players, equestrians, and several of you, many, many of you are yoga practitioners and teachers. There is also quite a bit of musical talent in this group, so we'll be watching for this. The band should come forth, right? You play piano, guitar, bass, ukulele, drums, and several of you have been involved in choir and musical theater. So you're an impressive class, and I think you will keep Dean Jefferson and the ambassadors very busy.
Oh, no.
So my advice to you is to get to know each other. Get to know us, your faculty and staff. You have an incredible support system here at Vermont Law School. You wouldn't be here if we didn't think you could succeed, so please take advantage of it. Take advantage of us. So at this time, President Dean McHenry, I present to you the Juris Doctor, LLM, and Master's entering classes of 2018.
John Miller, thank you very much. What an incredible group, and thank you to your team in our admissions office for bringing them here to South Royalton, Vermont, and we'll get to introduce them in just a moment. Dean Jefferson's reminded me to ask you to turn off or turn down your electronic devices, which I will now remember to do that to my own, so I'll do that. I think last year my son called me in the middle of my welcome speech. So I'm going to take a few minutes to give you some tips on the first year of your policy year as for master's students and your first year of law school for the JD students. But then you're going to hear from some other folks who know much more about it than I do. You're going to hear from Christopher Smith, an alumnus of our school, who was the president of the Student Bar Association when he was here. You'll hear a little bit about our town from Larry Trottier. We have our police chief here who Larry will introduce, and we're going to set up a separate meeting with our police chief because one of the things you'll learn about the police in Vermont is that they're very friendly and helpful, and they like to do everything to make sure that your experience here is a positive one. And we're also going to hear from Justice Robinson at the end of the presentation. So I'll try to move us along pretty quickly, but again, as I said earlier, don't hesitate to get up and fill up your coffee cup if you need to. So I want to welcome you to Vermont, as John has done. I want to welcome you to the town of South Royalton. I want to welcome you to the Green Mountains. As you probably know, if you've driven around or biked around or even walked around, that everything Vermont either goes up or down. There's no choice. There's a reason it's called Vermont, which means Green Mountains. And if you aren't from Vermont, and raise your hand if you're from Vermont. Let's see. You're about 10% of our class typically, and that's about right. Well, thank you. Well, I'll let you in on a secret. 10% of our classes come from Vermont. 20% of our students stay in Vermont. So that means another 10% of you will either fall in love with Vermont or fall in love in Vermont. So I want to tell you how thrilled and honored we are to have you here today, and that's the reason we have a bigger tent than we had last year. We've had a really busy year over the last year. It's been very eventful. It was my first year as dean, and today we are a stronger, more financially sustainable law school, and we look forward to teaching you and launching you in your careers. Vermont will be your home for the next year if you're a master's student, for the next 3 years if you're a master's student, and maybe longer if you do fall in love with Vermont. Enjoy it, explore it, visit it, find out as much as you can about Vermont while you're here. It is a very, very special place. And you'll learn a few other things about it from some of our other speakers. You, the students in the room, are the reason that we're here. That's the reason all the people you see in the back of the room are standing up, and they're either making coffee for you or they're figuring out what they're going to talk about in their first contracts class. It's been quiet here without you. It's been quiet over the last couple of weeks. I didn't get as many emails as I used to. I got to go home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's not going to happen anymore. You're the reason we design our classes, and you're the reason that we provide the challenging professional training that we do here at Vermont Law School. And we're immensely proud of this institution, and we're immensely proud of our alumni because they go off and do really good things. I had the pleasure of meeting with a number of third-year students, third-year law students who were graduating last spring. And I asked them to try to define for me what made Vermont Law School special. And I was sort of hoping they'd say the dean made it special. That never came up. And they did mention the faculty, and they even more mentioned the staff. But the one thing that they did mention about the school that was so special was their fellow students. And I said, well, what makes the students so special here? And they said that they found their colleagues here at Vermont Law School, their fellow students, to be purposeful. That they had come to Vermont Law School because they wanted to do something purposeful with their professional training. And I think of that as a wonderful way to consider your colleagues here at Vermont Law School, that sense of purpose. I also want to welcome you here as a colleague. The dean at Delaware Law School was here visiting us this summer, and he said he treats all students as his colleagues because you are entering professional life. I think that's right, so I welcome you here as a colleague. But I also want to remind you that that comes with some obligations with regard to your conduct. Everything you say, do, email, tweet, or Instagram from this day onward will reflect upon you. And a good way to remember it is what we used to tell first-year associates in my law firm, which was never put anything in writing that you wouldn't want to see on the front page of the New York Times. Good lesson, one I should always remember. You have an exceptional faculty. I'll introduce some of them in a moment. They have terrific academic and professional credentials. They're devoted and excellent teachers, and they share the strong sense of community here at Vermont Law School. But one thing that you may find that distinguishes Vermont Law School from lots of other institutions of higher education is also how much we value our staff and how much you will get to know and seek support from and gain support from the staff here at Vermont Law School. Whether you see them in the cafe, in the dean's office, cutting grass. By the way, if Al tells you stories, don't always believe him. They are a terrifically dedicated and committed group. They have your best interests at heart. Many of them have been here for decades, and they can teach you a lot. So take advantage of that. So I'm going to provide you a little initial advice, while age does not necessarily bring wisdom, it does bring some perspective. And I've benefited greatly by speaking to your student ambassadors wearing the yellow shirts, and Shirley will introduce them in a moment. And they've, I think, endorsed these recommendations. So I have about 5 or 6 recommendations I want to share with you as you start your professional careers as master's students or as JD students. My first recommendation is relax. Take a deep breath. You're in this for the long haul. You will be successful. Many have come before you successfully, and many will follow you successfully. Your student ambassadors, the ones in the yellow shirts, and the staff and the faculty that surround you here today have committed their careers to assisting you with your professional education. And they're here to assure that you succeed. You already have the brain power. We wouldn't have admitted you if you didn't. And now you need to add the time and the hard work and the commitment to succeed in achieving your professional goals. For the JD students, as the LLM, and we have a few entering LLM, raise your hands, LLM students. I've met a few of you earlier, 1 or 2 more, there we are. LLM is, as Stephanie Wilbanks will remind me, LLM?
Master of Letters of Law.
Master of Letters of Law, which means these are people who've already been to law school, and they've come back to polish their skills, whether it's in environmental law, whether it's in the American Legal Studies program, or elsewhere. You might have found in watching television that all of law school could be reduced to a 40-minute television show, or you've watched Legally Blonde or Paper Chase, and you might have gotten the impression that law school was not always the most pleasant experience. I think you can disregard that television and movie impression of law school, despite what your well-meaning friends or relatives have warned you about it. I think you will find Vermont Law School to be immensely supportive, engaging, and rewarding. Occasionally frustrating, but ultimately satisfying. So come with that open sense, as I'll mention in just a second. For the master's students, because of course you're master's students who get your degrees from Vermont Law School, I want to offer a special welcome because I was a master's student once, like Ariel, who you heard sing earlier, and then I subsequently attended law school. You master's students, raise your hand, master's students. Good bunch, yes, thank you. You master's students are going to have an unparalleled opportunity to learn about environmental issues, energy issues, agriculture issues, and restorative justice. I'll mention the March program in a second. And you will have a window into how lawyers think about these issues. And that will help you greatly in your policy work. And if you look at the jobs that our master's students have taken over the last 5 years, which we looked at last year, it's extraordinary the variety of jobs that they've taken on. Abby would agree, I think. But I want to make a special welcome. How many, please raise your hand if you're here for our Masters in Restorative Justice. So you are our Marge students. You are the first class of students getting a master's degree in restorative justice in one of the very first restorative justice programs in the country. It's really exciting. I won't try to explain restorative justice here to you today, but Professor Bobby Sand, who I think is right over there in the corner, will do so more than adequately a number of times. But we're really thrilled about this. As Masters of Arts in Restorative Justice, which is a Marge, you join the Melps, you join the Merles, which are the energy people, and you join the Mafouts, which sounds like Dr. Seuss, but it's not. It's our master's program. So that's my first recommendation to all of you, which is to relax. And my second recommendation, which may seem contrary to that, is to apply yourself fully. Don't hold back. Jump in, not just the White River behind me. Whether it's class discussions, law reviews, VJEL, the Vermont Journal of Environmental Law, student government, or occasionally the White River on a hot afternoon, you have a lot of work ahead of you, subjects you will need to immerse yourself in your first year, but fully engage in the process. A Canadian journalist named Malcolm Gladwell, many of you have probably listened to his podcasts or read his books, talks about the magic number of 10,000 hours. His analogy, by the way, is that the Beatles, which was a famous rock and roll group when I was young, the Beatles played 3-4 shows a night in a Hamburg nightclub in the basement for 10,000 hours, and that's how they taught themselves to be such a great rock and roll band. You may not need to spend 10,000 hours, but you probably are going to need to spend something like that to be accomplished policymakers if you're master's students or lawyers. And many of you will spend many more than 10,000 hours doing so. There's no mathematical or hourly formula to becoming an accomplished policymaker or an accomplished lawyer, but know that you are going to have to put in the time and the effort to do so. And the LLM students in the audience can help you with that because they've already done it. And for the master's students, you can look on with bemusement or amusement as your classmates turn into lawyers right before your very eyes, examining their receipts at the Worthy Burger to determine if they have entered into a contractual relationship, debating whether their landlord has a duty of care to clean the snow off their walkway, or proposing that they have a constitutional right to have the library open past a certain hour, or whether they have a constitutional right to fashion anatomical snow sculptures on the VLS quad under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Dean McCormick can explain to you why you do not possess that constitutional right. And she has some photos to help explain that. And for you JD students in the audience, to the great annoyance of your significant others, you will be the ones in the movie theater that exclaim in a stage whisper, "That would never happen in a real court of law." Yesterday's New York Times, the Week in Review, had a terrific article by Frank Bruni, who shared some suggestions about going to college and how to benefit and get the most out of college. And I recommend his article to all of you get off the New York Times feed. But I think all of his suggestions apply to law school, so I'll just mention a couple of them as part of this applying yourself fully. He talked about, he looked at some studies of how people got the most out of college. You know, what were the experiences in college that students found most beneficial? And there were 4 of them that he stressed. One was, he said, the wisest students move into what he called a peer relationship with the institution rather than a consumer relationship. And they chose leadership roles. So treat Vermont Law School, you are our peers, you are our colleagues. Treat us as such, our staff and faculty, and engage with us as your peers. The second is build social capital. Social capital is kind of a popular term these days. It means getting to know a lot of people. Widen the circle of human beings who know you and care about you. Get to know people, and our well-being counselors would advise you of the same. Third, take advantage of the diversity offered to you, educationally, morally, and strategically. Embrace the wealth of ideas that will surround you here at Vermont Law School. You'll take that with you in the rest of your education. And fourth, establish relationships with the faculty as mentors. Take on a sustained academic project, whether that's writing an article, and play a significant role in a campus organization. That's not just the SBA, but the SBA is a terrific way to do so. You'll hear from Kyle in a moment about that, but look for those opportunities. In doing so, my third recommendation is be flexible and be resilient. Many of you have come to Vermont Law School, as John pointed out, because you have a particularly strong interest in a subject matter. You want to become an environmental lawyer. You want to become an environmental justice lawyer. You want to become a restorative justice lawyer. That is terrific, and I hope you will do so. But many of you will find as you go along that there are other subject matters that you become even more fascinated in. And they could even include subjects like tax and civil procedure. And you decide that you want to change your career path. That's absolutely fine. That's why you're in law school. That's why you're getting a master's degree, to figure out the stuff that you're good at and that you most like doing. There will also be tremendous ups and downs in your journey while you're here. And my wife, who worked at a K-12 school, used to sometimes say, when the parents would say to her, I want my children to be happy. And my wife would say, I think you should want your children to be resilient, because if you can teach yourself to be resilient, you can be happy. Dean McCormick shared with me this terrific quote from Nelson Mandela, who you know was imprisoned on an island off the coast of South Africa for many years. He said, do not judge me by my success. Judge me by how many times I fell down and got back up again. It's a great quote, great way to think about your life. How do you benefit from your failures? That's often the key to your success. Recommendation number 4, have a life when you're here. Coming to Vermont Law School is not the abandonment of your yoga practice, as John mentioned earlier, or your equestrian skills, or your polo playing, or crew, or whatever. You need to build into your daily schedules and your lives on a regular and recurring basis some time away from your studies, to walk your dog, paddle your canoe, go to a yoga or spin class taught by Jen O'Connor, a second-year student, or simply read a book that has nothing to do with law and policy. Be sure to build that into your schedule. And as part of that, recommendation number 5 is stay healthy, exercise often, eat well, and get enough sleep. It's important that you stay healthy while you're here. It gets dark and cold in Vermont in the middle of the winter time. You can come hiking with me up to Kent's Ledge. We'll do that once a week. Put on your micro spikes. Don't slip, as one of our ambassadors did last year, and cut your hand on the ice. But it also means eating well, and we have a terrific cafe here. It means thinking about other things. And there was a wonderful article in the New York Times 2 weeks ago about getting enough sleep and the good things you need to do with that. One is, don't put your electronics next to your bed. I thought that was a good recommendation. My 6th recommendation is give back to your community. And you have a couple of community leaders here with our police chief and our chair of our select board. If you look at our staff and faculty, you will find that they are actively involved in this community. I went on a mountain biking race on Saturday. I think I finished last, Maureen, but who checked me in but our registrar, Maureen Moriarty, and who organized the NanoFest, but the head of our environmental program, Ann Linehan, who served on our school board, Lorraine Atwood, who served on the local school board, Peter Teachout in Hanover. They've served in state government, they've served in state agencies, on commissions. Our staff and faculty take this community very seriously. We hope you will do the same. Don't think about your time here as such a short one that you can't be involved in the community. There are lots of opportunities, and Larry can tell you about them, because we have so many things that you could be involved in helping with. My next recommendation, and I think it's my last one here, is that there are no stupid questions when you're at a law and policy school, except one that Dean McCormick reminded me of. The one where the answer is on the syllabus. So do read the syllabus before you ask the questions. But remember that you're here to learn, and it's okay to ask that question. And sometimes that very obvious question that's at the tip of your tongue that you are slightly embarrassed to ask is the one that all of your classmates want to ask too, and they're just waiting for you to ask it. So go right ahead and do so. You'll get some tips along the way about where to buy warm coats and when to put on snow tires. My wife looked at the sign in Norwich where we live that said that there's no street parking between November 1st and April 30th, and she said, oh, they must be kidding. They weren't kidding. Ann Linehan and Katrina Munyon are particularly good sources of information on that. I want to end by mentioning just a couple of larger national things that have been going on. A year ago, we had the horrific events that took place in Charlottesville, and to pick up the front page of the newspaper is to know that we are facing tremendous challenges as a country, tremendous challenges in terms of our level of engagement, particularly large challenges in rural America that is feeling very left out of the national debate. And it may be that those trying times have contributed to your reason for going to law school. The news is often full of incidents about bigotry, hatred, and lack of acceptance. And I think all of us feel offended, angry, and upset by these kinds of incidents. And in many cases, we want to talk about them, which is a good thing, and we hopefully provide a forum for doing so. We're here to listen and engage with you. We vigorously defend and encourage freedom of speech and assembly, rights that a number of you will explore in your constitutional law classes. And we also denounce acts of bigotry, hatred, and fear directed at any person on the basis of their race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, or any factor. Acts of hatred and fear employed by those who may seek to divide, separate, or displace us. We need to recognize evil and call it what it is, and your choice of an education at Vermont Law School will allow you to do something to combat such evil. So we hope you will take that opportunity. Our country needs the skills and training and judgment you will develop here at Vermont Law School. And I'll just remind you again to relax, apply yourself fully, be flexible, and also be resilient. Have a life outside of your studies. Stay healthy, eat, sleep, and exercise well and often. Give back to this community and figure out how to do so. Feel free to ask any question except that's obvious from the syllabus, and seize the opportunity that your education is presenting you. So thank you very much. So I want to move on next to making some introductions, and I'll ask the faculty members, if I mention their names, and staff members to just stand up and wave their hands madly so people can begin to recognize you. By the way, in about a year's time, you will know all these people, many of them on a first name basis. So I'm going to start with the first year JD faculty, Greg Johnson, over there, right there, and Peter. Actually, we have so many people to do, so I have to hold your applause till the very end for all of our faculty and staff, because otherwise we'll be here all morning. And Peter Teachout, who I think I saw, Peter's over here, teaching constitutional law. Dean Sean Nolan, who is teaching civil procedure, over there in the corner, to my left. Professors Jennifer Taub and David Firestone for contracts. There we are over there. Shouting is okay. Professors Hillary Hoffman and Lori Baranovan for legislation and regulation. There we go, Lori and Hillary over there. Professors Joan Vogel and Mark Latham for torts. Where's the king of torts, Mark Latham? All right. Oh, there he is. he occasionally wears a crown when he is the king of torts. Reed Loader and John Echevarria teaching property. I think John's over this way. Phil Meyer and Bobby Sand in the spring for criminal law. Phil Meyer's over there, Bobby's in the corner. Our legal writing team, again, Greg Johnson, Brian Porto, Jared Carter, and Catherine Frigos, our legal writing. And by the way, I just mentioned, there's probably no skill in law school more important than improving your legal writing. Some of you come with terrific legal writing skills. Others of you are looking forward to improving them. The more writing you do, the better, and this is a terrific group to help with that. Our legal research faculty, Cynthia Lewis, Jay Moldow, and Christine Ryan. Where are you? There we are. And they also run the library, which you will find in the wintertime, and most of the rest of the year is the social center of our campus. Other JD faculty, would you please either stand or wave your hands? Other JD faculty. So there we are. We're going to introduce some of you again in a little bit. Great. So I want to mention now the environmental faculty. First, Jennifer Rushlow is our new incoming head of the Environmental Law Center. She's a former attorney at the Conservation Law Foundation. She'll start on the 10th of September. Kevin Jones, Jeannie Oliver, and Mark James from the Energy Institute. Kevin, I saw you back there. Mark's over there. Jeannie's over in the corner there. Great. The director of our Center for Agriculture and Food Systems is Lori Baranovan, doing double duty. And the clinics, Jim May and Jill Heaps for their South Royalton League Clinic. We have Jill with us. I think Jill might be, oh, she's right here, back on vacation. Welcome back. Beth Locker from our SIP program over in the corner in white. Gary Brooks with us on the general practice program. I don't know if Gary's back yet. Sue Tipp, who I think might be traveling with a group of Asian governmental officials who are visiting this week. The professor and director Joseph Brennan and program manager Katrina Munyon in academic success. There we go. I think Joe still is the tallest person on campus, so he's easy to find. And I'd like to recognize Linda Heemer as well. Where are you, Linda, for our online programs? There. Linda runs our overall online program. You met John Miller earlier, but John, can you stand? And it's all of your staff in the admissions group.
Yep.
Where is that? Katie, Nick, where are you? Katie Merrill over there, great. Something I learned a lot about this year, which is budgeting. Lorraine Atwood and Rob Weber, and anybody from the business office over there. You are not allowed to go ask Lorraine separately for money without consulting me first. Sean Nolan, who is our incoming Dean of Faculty. Sean over in the corner on the left. Beth McCormick, our Dean of Students. There he is, right there. And our Vice Dean of Students, Shirley Jefferson, who you're going to hear from in a moment.
I'm the associate dean.
Excuse me, Associate Dean. Shirley is also a graduate of Vermont Law School. Some good stories there. Abby Armstrong and the Career Services staff, could you all stand? I was over there. Abby, how many years?
Oh, God. 35.
35 years, pretty good. Melody DeFlorio and the financial aid staff, and if you have Melody with us, there she is in the back. Our registrar, Maureen Moriarty, are here. Thank you, Maureen. And our IT director, Sean Lee, and the IT staff. So that would be Jennifer Lawrence, Bill Bond, Oscar. You will get to know the IT folks because you will call them in a great panic when something won't turn on properly. Cynthia Lewis already mentioned the library. I want to mention our staff from the Office of Alumni Relations and Development, Mary Wells, over there. And I don't know if Dave Thurlow is with us today. As well. And then I want to mention our incredibly hardworking buildings and grounds crew. They're the ones who mow the grass underneath here. And probably the only reason that they're not here under the tent is they're over fixing something else. So that's the reason why. I also want to thank Martina Rakowski and Jeff Jones, our chef. Martina is also probably in the kitchen working on things. They run the cafe, and all of the staff from our cafe who are over there. So please wave your hands and thank you. I would like to, is anybody I've left out? Raise your hand if I've left you out. Oh, how did I leave you out? Sorry about that. One more, the others. Well, thank you. A hand, oh, I'm sorry, from the library, thank you. A hand for everybody I've left out. So I'm next going to turn it over to Larry Trottier. Larry is a lifelong Vermonter and an owner of the local John Deere dealership, but he told me a story about somebody who was driving over to Pomfret, which is the town just below us. And if you drive over to Pomfret, there's a place where you get to a sign, and the sign says Pomfret this way and Pomfret the other way. There's two ways to Pomfret. And I'll say they were from New Jersey. I won't say New York, where I'm from. This couple from New Jersey were driving around, and they came up to the sign, and they were looking at it, trying to figure out which way do I go to Pomfret from South Royalton. And there was a Vermonter there, an old-time Vermonter, sort of like Larry, standing there, and he turned to the Vermonter, and they said, well, does it matter which way I go to Pomfret? This way or that way? And the Vermonter looked at him and said, not to me. You'll hear a lot of those kinds of stories about Vermonters, but they're wonderful people, so I'm going to turn the podium over to Larry to welcome you. Larry.
Well, thank you, everyone. On behalf of the town of Royalton and the Royalton Select Board, and also our new Chief of Police, Loretta Stallmaker. Please stand up. We welcome all you students from all over the country and all over the world. This is really an opportunity for a local person as myself to meet so many different people here. It really means a lot from a local fellow that just started with nothing and went up to a business and then kept going, and here we are in front of all you nice law students, and this is really an honor for me and for the town. You guys, Dean McHenry has talked to you about all the kinds of things you're going to encounter here and what you will be getting to do and see. And we have a lot of opportunities for some social work to be done and some volunteering. My wife runs the food shelf here in town. I'm working personally pretty hard on a new walking trail from Payne's Beach, from up that way to the school. And there's going to be some clearing that needs to be done. There's going to be some legal work that needs to be done. The dean has mentioned to me that you folks could participate in that, and the work that could be done would be great. We just got to get going with this, and I've got all the permissions, and so we're just in infancy of it, but this is something we'd like to have you folks be involved in, because you also will have an opportunity to walk back and forth next to the river, and I know most of you, or quite a few of you, have dogs, and we think that's an awful great thing, but you got to pick up the poop when you get done. So anyway, thanks again for coming to Vermont Law School. It's a very important part of the town of Royalton. If you come down here, once you get here, and you'll see at night, you can't hardly find a place to park, and that's an awful good thing for the businesses. It means everybody is having a good time and being a social person to the restaurants that we have and some of the businesses, the co-op store. It's just great, and I even have some of the law students come up and they buy some lawnmower parts from us, and which is great. And I've had a good relationship with Vermont Law School, thanks to the different deans over the years, that they will see most of the equipment here. It happens to be green, which isn't all bad. But anyway, with that being said, I want to thank you and welcome you. Our meetings for the Select Board is every Tuesday, and every second Tuesday and fourth Tuesday of the month. It's 7 o'clock over across there in our town offices, and I welcome you to come and sit in on our meetings and to see how the local government is done, and how maybe sometimes it doesn't get quite done, but we try our best. We have 5 members of the Select Board, and they are alternated for an election. I have actually been, this is my 15th year of being elected over a 3-year interim and then some 2-year interims, but it's pretty interesting. And I know we have, from time to time, we have some ambassadors from the law school that come and sit in and see how we go and report back to you folks. So With that being said, thank you very much for coming, and the town of Wilton really appreciates you folks, and we look forward to working with all of you, and in the future, law school has been very good for the town of Wilton and the surrounding communities. Thank you.
Larry, thanks very much. Do you do chainsaw repair?
Sure.
Good. I got an old chainsaw, needs a chain. I got to buy. That's great. I left two people I want to make sure I mention. One is Stephen Dicus, Professor Stephen Dicus. Raise your hand, Steve. Over there, one of our emeritus professors. And one of the great pleasures for me is having deans that I can call up and have confidential conversations with. Kinvin, would you please stand? Kinvin Roth is our former dean of Vermont Law School. I've already had a chance to mention her, but the person who really organizes this event every year is Shirley Jefferson. She's a graduate of the class of 1986, and she has a couple of introductions that she will provide. Dean Jefferson.
Welcome. How do you all feel? Come on now, let the ambassadors outdo y'all now. Let me see. How are you doing, class? Thank you. Well, welcome. We've really been working very hard here, preparing for you all to come today. Nothing is too good for you all. But before I get started, I would like to thank two women who put our beautiful student handbook together. Will Angie and Karen Henderson please come up? Angie Campbell, I know I'm putting y'all on the spot, but I want the students, I want you all to pick your handbook up later, but I want you all to really take good care of your handbook. You know, read it, get to know what's in there, but know that Angie and Karen worked so hard. This is the first year that they've done this. Thank you. So when you see them around campus, thank them. They did a beautiful job. I would like to introduce the student ambassadors. They are a group of students who work under my supervision. They're my other ears and eyes. No, they're not spies. Close to it. But also they are friends of the friendless. They are peer counselors. They work over in career services. They work in admissions, take you on a tour. They're just great to know. So please get a chance to know them. And I would like to call them up at this time. Will the ambassadors please come up so they can see your faces? Come on, get up. Come on, hey, y'all gotta get some energy up in here now. Don't let the students, out. Rashida had coffee. Please, you see Rashida, please do not give Rashida coffee. No, she can't have coffee. No. This is what happens. Boy, I have a lot of ambassadors. I'm telling you, look at these ambassadors. They're from everywhere. New Jersey, Chicago, Chi-Town, Montreal, Alabama. Anybody from Alabama out there? Woo-hoo! All right, there's somebody. I had to get Alabama in. I'm from Selma. I'm telling you. But let's give them a hand. They've been really working very hard. What you doing over there? Oh, you got mixed up. Okay. That's one of them. It's mixed up. Yeah. But what I want you all to do too, stand up for a minute. Shake yourselves. Get a little, come on, stand up for a minute. I know you all tired of those hard chairs, but we feel like we need to introduce everybody that's made this program important. So stand up and shake yourselves loose and yawn. All right, now sit back down. Thank you. All right, ambassadors, y'all get back to work. Thank you. This is like a little, they on the clock, they say. And that's a little icebreaker, you know, to try to get you all to feel like you're welcome and part of the community, because you are. And I'd just like to say something about this law school. To me, this is the best law school in the whole world. It is. And you all going to find out that it is. because it gave me an opportunity 30 years ago when no one else would. And I've never forgotten that. And so I love this place. I know you're gonna love this place. We're all gonna get through here together. And one thing you can depend on, our faculty and our staff, they are here for you. And your students too. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce your SBA president. Come on up, Kyle. Cloth. This is your SBA president. He's gonna set the tone for you. He's going to keep you all on the straight and narrow path, and you all going to keep him on the straight and narrow path. So it's all going to work out. But I'd just like to introduce you all to him, Kyle Cloth. Thank
you. Good morning. Let me be the 8th or 9th person to welcome you to Vermont Law School. As Dean Jefferson said, my name is Kyle Cloth. I'm the president of the Student Bar Association. Something you should know about me is that I'm a bit of a skeptic of sorts. I don't believe in ghosts, for example, even though I'm told that my house on North Windsor Street is deeply haunted. And when someone says everything happens for a reason, I tend to roll my eyes. But after a year at Vermont Law School, I'm starting to soften up. In fact, I'm actually starting to believe that we're called to this place. Let me explain. In May 1973, a young rocket scientist living in Lincoln, Massachusetts got a call from a friend who had stumbled upon a half-page ad in the New York Times announcing the creation of a new law school, where else? In South Royalton, Vermont. The young rocket scientist, just 4 months out of law school, happened to know the town only because he had picked strawberries at his friend's place up on Howe Hill Road. He asked himself, what have I got to lose? And joined the faculty. And 4 decades later, half of you will have the unique pleasure, as I did, of learning contracts from Professor David Firestone. Or take, for example, a member of our board of trustees who enrolled at VLS just a couple months after marrying his wife. Something about the campus felt peculiar to him, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Only later did he discover a photograph of his great-great-grandmother, a school teacher, standing beside her class outside of the South Royalton Schoolhouse, better known today as Debevoise Hall. You too have been called here. For some of you, that reason is abundantly clear. It animates everything you do. And for others, it may just have yet only manifested as an instinct that a mastery of the law is the only way forward. In the quietest moments, you can feel that reason flickering in your chest like a tiny flame. In moments of stress, and I hate to inform you, but there will be many, that flame may grow dim. My favorite composer, Gustav Mahler, once said, I am hitting my head against the walls, but the walls are giving way. I've never heard a better description of the law school experience than that. But you must never ever lose sight of that flame. You begin your legal education in deeply uncertain times of lawlessness, of corruption, of wanton cruelty, and an ever-widening gap between the haves and have-nots. Maybe you're like one of our 2 student trustees who quit his job at a takeout chicken restaurant after watching the inauguration and resolved to fight for a future that he believes in. I suspect you'll hear dozens of stories like his this week alone. Now, reading the news each morning may fill you with righteous anger, but what is to be done? The rigors of law school hardly permit you the time to eat and bathe, let alone rush to the barricades at a moment's notice. That's where the SBA comes in. Not only is it your student government, but a powerful vehicle for lasting change in your community. And like any other elected body, it is only what passionate, engaged participants make of it. Run for office, join a committee, or simply attend our meetings. We want thinkers and doers, dreamers and pragmatists, people just burning up with a desire to improve the world around them. If that sounds like you, I encourage you to get involved with the SBA. In closing, there hangs in the Chase Center a plaque bearing the words of its namesake, the late Dean Jonathan B. Chase. There is a spirit here, he said, a commitment to the idea of community, which is what brought many of us here in the first place. Academic excellence alone is not enough. I want all to feel affection for their time here. That feeling will ensure the future of Vermont Law School. The truth is, I know of no other place that can nourish the mind and the soul in equal parts, quite like this brave little school. Here at VLS, you will feed that flickering flame into a blazing torch so that you may carry it into the darkest, forgotten corners of society. We have a world to rebuild. And as I look around, I see precisely the lucky few fit for that task. Never ever forget, you have been called to this place. So how will you answer? Welcome to Vermont Law School.
We're doing a podium adjustment here. And you'll see Bill Bond, who's shaping the podium, the person who knows how to do it, in case we need to use this. Great, thanks. Thanks, Bill. So I'm next going to have the pleasure of introducing Christopher Smith. We always have an alumni speaker, and when you hear from Christopher, you will know why I went first, because no one will want to follow Christopher Smith to the podium. Justice Robinson, I'm sure, will be equal to the task. Christopher is a graduate of Vermont Law School, class of 2014. He is a member of our Alumni Association Board of Trustees. While attending VLS, he was a legal writing dean's fellow, a teacher's assistant for constitutional law, the regional chair of the National LGBTQ Bar Association Student Congress, and president of the Star Student Bar Association, the same position that Kyle currently holds. He's currently working as an associate attorney with the Business and Banking Group at the law firm of Cohen, Kinney, Valicenti, and Cook in Western Massachusetts. From Springfield, am I right? Berkshire, Massachusetts. Please join me in welcoming Christopher Smith.
Love you, Christopher!
Thank you, Courtney. Nobody likes me. Hi, how's everybody doing? Need a little more than that. Good morning, fellow fighting swans. As Dean McHenry said, my name is Christopher Smith, JD class of 2014. I prefer the pronouns he, him, his when referring to me, but in my writing, I prefer the gender neutral they, them, their. As a white, Christian, cisgender, male corporate attorney, I'm technically the man. But at the Social Justice Roundtable this summer, Professor Greg Johnson was kind enough to remind me that by using gender-neutral pronouns in my writing and pushing for their use in collaborative processes, I advocate for sex and gender equality. And I'm starting to think he might be right. This summer, one of our partners changed the word his to their in his markup of one of the agreements I wrote. It's proof that anyone can make a positive difference, even when you're the man. But I digress. Welcome to Vermont Law School. I am here on behalf of the Vermont Law School Alumni Association to tell you who we are and what we do. This is my 4th time addressing an incoming class, and I should warn you that I also like to give unsolicited advice. But since I think my best wisdom comes from deferring to the wisdom of others, a lot of the advice I give will come from fellow alumni and the incredible group of professionals at my law firm. But first things first. What is the Vermont Law School Alumni Association, and what does it do? The Alumni Association is made up of every graduate of this institution. It will be you someday. The association is governed by a board of directors, which I am a member of, and I sit on the executive committee, the development committee, and am chair of the mentoring committee. The association fills many functions. Among the most important, we help fund the education you will receive. As you walk around this campus, look at the names: Debevoise Hall, Chase Community Center, the Cheryl Hanna Classroom. These represent the generosity of alumni, professors, trustees, and other donors who are looking back and looking out for the upcoming generations of swans. In addition to raising money, the board of directors offers and represents the alumni interests and perspectives to the board of trustees and the administration. The Alumni Association is the primary career network for many swans. We also organize regional events to keep in touch. We're here for you as well. Go to Career Services to be matched with an alumni mentor. We have hundreds of alumni who are eager to connect with you and be a resource. Over this coming semester, you will receive emails from me and my fellow mentoring committee members giving you information about the program. We care about your future because it is our legacy. Or, as Susan Donegan, JD class of 1986 said, we are your ghosts of Christmas future. Don't wait until you are one of us to connect with us. That may seem like a long way away at this point, but your time here is going to fly by. I say it every year that it feels like yesterday I was sitting where you are, listening to our barefoot Sba President, Jess Wilkerson, JD class of 2012, that's right, advocating for us to find our own path and to breastfeed our children. Everyone loves that. Obviously, I'm in no position to comment on breastfeeding, but I will echo Jess's other sentiment. Be open to any path that may present itself here. Believe it or not, before law school, I had hair past my elbows and a beard with a mission to practice family law as a guardian ad litem. But my 1L summer, I had the opportunity through the National LGBT Bar Association to work for Prudential Financial in their in-house legal department. In my family, we have a thing called the no thank you bite. You can't say no thank you to something until you've taken a taste. Well, that summer something clicked and now I'm the man. Partners at my firm had similar experiences. Jeff Cook, who is our managing partner and head of the business group, said, be open to the possibilities and expand your horizons as far as possible. Kevin Kinney, another partner at my firm, said when he started law school, he had a very specific path to success in his mind. Life, however, did not present the opportunities quite as he'd hoped, so he took the paths open to him rather than trying to beat the path in his mind. Each variation from that predetermined path, he said, turned out to be some of the best aspects of his professional development. Now he's a named partner at a thriving firm with an encyclopedic knowledge of Massachusetts employment law. Katie Thomas, JD class of 2013, put it quite succinctly, saying, you'll be happier if you welcome each experience and don't try to engineer an outcome. She says that this also applies to life as well as your career. Whether you take no thank you bites or not, and you should, a legal education done right will change you. It's what I like to call the beauty and the damage of law school. You will be challenged and pushed, and you will develop a new way of thinking. Pay attention to the growth of those around you, because for me, that was the only way I could recognize my own growth. And then suddenly, before you know it, you will be one of us, an alumnum. Remember the names: Debevoise, Chase, Hannah. It will be your turn to look back and look out for the swans who come after you. When I asked my fellow alumni, perhaps unsurprisingly, many of them stressed the importance of making health and wellness a priority while you're here. A New York Times article last year described the unexamined and almost invisible epidemic of mental illness and substance abuse in the legal profession. This school has lost too many eminent professors, beloved alumni, and promising students to this epidemic. And having known a few myself, I know that struggling with mental illness or substance abuse does not erase one's brilliance or the positive impact one has on others. We often encourage those who are struggling to ask for help, but asking for help is hard, especially given that legal professionals must often adopt a posture of infallibility. Add the stigma surrounding mental illness, and it's no wonder that legal professionals are particularly hesitant to ask for help and will turn to substances for release. Alex Sohn, a criminal attorney at my firm, offered advice in the words of Chuck D of Public Enemy. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the hype. Which is to say, it's easy to get caught up in the occult notions of law school and lawyers. Ignore those myths, because nobody is infallible. Or as I like to say, everybody poops. Jesse Cook-Dubin, a partner in my practice group, says, 80% of being a lawyer is cleaning up messes, and 20% of those are messes you made. There's a reason it's called practicing law. We start from the assumption that nobody is perfect. You're entering a rigorous educational experience and an often grueling professional life after. It will get hard and stressful. find non-substance-based forms of release, and ask for help when you need it. And don't wait to be asked for help. Offer it if you can provide it. And if you don't know where to turn, you turn to Shirley Jefferson. It is important that you take care of each other and yourselves. Which brings me to another common piece of advice from alumni about South Royalton itself. Our school motto is Lex Pro Urbe et Orbe, law for the community and the world. That starts here. You are about to experience community in a unique way. By virtue of the intense law school experience and this tiny dip in the Green Mountains, the people sitting around you, the people up here, and the roughly 1,000 other people that live, work, and study in this town will fill up your life. You will be each other's friends, family, neighbors, competition, colleagues, lovers, and leaders. There will be an incredible amount of overlap in the roles you play in each other's lives. Small ripples can make big waves. Be kind and respectful. Be collegiate rather than cutthroat. Remember that Friday night at Crossroads quickly becomes Monday morning in Chase. As Natalie Wickland, JD class of 2013, and the queen of brass tacks, am I right? Oh, yes. Put it quite succinctly with her 4.5 words of advice. Don't be an asshole. When you are in the trenches of a taxing education, you will find comfort, strength, and support in this community. So remember to be strong, comforting, and supportive for each other. Or put more eloquently by Nick Stiles' JD class of 2014, swans fly together. And at the risk of overextending that metaphor, even after we fly the nest, that principle rings true. Crystal Abbey, JD class of 2015 said, take care of our little hamlet in the woods. These are the people you are going to know in the profession forever. That's not super common at other law schools. We're a tight-knit crowd and becoming a swan is pretty legit. Alumni trustee Karis North, JD and Master's class of 1995 said, today you are welcomed to the family and continuum of Vermont Law School. Being a law student is not a 3-year deal. It is the beginning of the rest of your life and your entree into a community of legal professionals. It only starts as a student, but continues as an alum. Alumni span this planet, but we are still a single flock. And that is only possible if we nurture this community and the relationships we built here. So I'll finish my not so little spiel with a few more quick nuggets of wisdom from fellow alumni that I thought bear repeating. Ari Baruch, JD class of 2015 said, prepare like an underdog, think like a champion, and behave like a friend. Margot Valenti, JD class of 2013 said, befriend the library staff because they know secrets, have keys, and usually a stash of candy. Stephen Yoakum, JD class of 2016 said, concerning the composting toilets, do not look long into the abyss unless the abyss gaze back at you. And Megan Hunter, JD in Master's class of 2014 said, dance like nobody is watching and write emails like they will be read aloud in a deposition. With that, I hope you found some of this helpful. Thank you for indulging me on behalf of the Alumni Association. I will be around campus, so please feel free to stop by and say hello. Congratulations on getting here. Welcome to the flock. Go Swans!
You can understand why you don't want to follow Christopher Smith. Just a quick note on the Wellbeing Commission before I introduce Justice Robinson, and that is that we are embarked on a year-long effort here in the state of Vermont, which was launched by Justice Robinson and her colleague, Paul Reiber, who's the Chief Justice of the Vermont Supreme Court, to look broadly at lawyer well-being, both in the profession and at the law school. And a group of students and staff and faculty are working with us on this project, and if it's an area that you have interest in, we'd love to have your comments and your support, and we'll be presenting a report to the Vermont legal community later this year. One quick note before I introduce Justice Robinson, which is that we will do a reception line right up here after she swears you in on your oath, and we'd love to have all of you come by and have a chance to shake your hands, and we'd ask all of our speakers who are up here to stay with us and shake hands with everybody. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Associate Justice of the Vermont Supreme Court, Beth Robinson. She received her Bachelor of Arts degree from Dartmouth College, which is only about 15 miles away from us as the crow flies, in 1986, and a Juris Doctor degree from the University of Chicago Law School in 1989. She clerked for the Honorable David B. Santel of the United States Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit in 1989-1990, and practiced with the very prominent and well-respected Vermont law firm of Langrock, Sperry & Wool for 18 years. She then served as general counsel to Governor Peter Shumlin, who just stepped down as governor a year or two ago. He appointed her to the Vermont Supreme Court as Associate Justice on November 28th, 2011. And I would like to just add a personal note that I got a chance to speak to Justice Robinson and confirm that she was speaking, and she was wearing her wool socks and her Crocs in her office. So I said, that's the right person to come and speak here at Vermont Law School. Justice Robinson, we are so happy to welcome you.
There's nothing worse than being introduced after the person who you've repeatedly heard, no, you don't want to speak after. And for good reason. So I don't know that I have a lot to add to those brilliant remarks. I was actually talking with my law clerks. I did this 4 years ago for your counterparts who were the incoming class 4 years ago. And when I asked my law clerks then, well, what did you want to hear when you were coming into law school? What are the important messages? And they basically said, it doesn't matter. They're going to be so nervous, they're not listening, they won't remember. So I was really reassured by that. So in getting ready for today, I had the same conversation with the law clerks, and I said, what are the important messages to hear as you launch law school? Well, of course, it turns out that group included a bunch of people who were sitting there 4 years ago when I talked. So they all dutifully recited back the things that I had said to them 4 years ago. And one of the problems with this job is that I'll never know whether that's because my remarks 4 years ago were helpful or whether they were kissing up to me because I'm a justice. So it turns out they must be somewhat on target because they overlap almost entirely with everything you've already heard. So I'm here to reinforce some messages. When I think about incoming law students, I guess there are three lessons I want to impart, but really they're excuses to tell stories from my own glory days in law school. So the first story stars my roommate, Marcia, with me in a supporting role, maybe as the villain, depending on how you look at it. It was the spring semester, and we were preparing for our civil procedure final exam, and I suspect it's the same here. The exam is 100% of your grade, so you've been slogging away all semester, and it all boils down to this exam. And we were sitting in the living room with our computers side by side, putting the final touches on our outlines, which, for those of you who haven't been through this experience yet, those become the tools that get you through your exam, and the quality of your outline and your familiarity with it often can make or break your success on the exam. So we spent weeks perfecting our outlines, and as we sat there, and like I said, it was spring semester, which becomes relevant because in the springtime there are a lot of marshmallow peeps for sale at the store. And in celebration of finishing this project, I leapt up to go to the kitchen to get some marshmallow peeps. And in the course of my leaping up and racing to get the marshmallow peeps, I tripped over the power cord to Marcia's computer. Now, this was 1987. Technology was a little different from what it is now, and Marcia had a discount computer. And so the consequence of my zeal to get the marshmallow peep was that I destroyed her outline and it was gone forever, never to be recovered. Now, at that moment, I think Marcia was certain that her legal career was over before it even began. Life would not go on. It was the worst thing that ever could have happened. And in my defense, it was a pretty awful thing for me to have destroyed my roommate's outline the night before our Civ Pro final. The reason I tell that story partly is just because I feel guilty, and the more I tell it, the more But mostly it's because, as it turns out, she got through the test. She had a distinguished law school career. She's had a distinguished practice as a lawyer, and in fact, somebody in particular who will be interested to know that she actually has a side career, a very successful side career as a professional poker player. So one of you, if you want to talk afterwards, I can give you clues how to match those. The point is, you're going to have a moment like that, or two, or three, while you're in law school, and probably after that when you're practicing law. When something happens, you're in a situation and you think, oh my gosh, this is the worst thing that ever happened. Nobody has ever had any experience as bad as this. I can't go on. And I want to say to you, it'll be all right. It really will. If it helps you to think about Marcia's Civ Pro outline, just to sort of relax yourself, go ahead and think about that. But take a deep breath and move forward, and don't feel paralyzed by the moment. And I think that really ties into a broader lesson, and I think Christopher emphasized this in an important way, which is there are also going to be not just moments, but periods, right? The stressful moment might become a stressful period, and it might even just become an overall stressful life. If that happens, and it will, you need to be attentive to your sleep, to your physical well-being, to your mental health, to your substance use, and your relationships. Nothing that you will do here, and nothing that you'll do as a practicing lawyer is worth compromising your physical well-being, your mental health, or the relationships that are important to sustaining your life. It's just not. And even if it feels like it is for a minute, like, okay, I'm just gonna only do this for the next month, and then I'll be kind to the people who I care about again and engage with the world. It doesn't work that way, because that month becomes another month, becomes another month. So when you find yourself slipping away from a sustainable lifestyle, stop. Figure something out. Start an exercise regimen. See a therapist. Go coach your kids' Little League team. Have regularly scheduled date nights with your partner where you don't talk about law at all. Talk to Dean Jefferson. Talk to an ambassador. But please be attentive to that, because I can tell from the folks I spoke with when I first got here and just hearing your bios that this is a really exciting group of motivated people who are going to change the world, and we need you for the long haul. So remember that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and sustain yourself for the long haul and take care of yourself. The second story that I'm going to tell is really a story in two parts, and it has the same characters, because it's from law school, so it's me and my law school roommate. And the first part took place in Professor Wally Blum's tax class, and he was trying to convey this complicated notion about discount rates and tax treatment, and he posed a question that was stumping everybody in the class. Well, Marcia and I tended to pass notes during class, and it wasn't like the junior high school kind of notes about Billy's cute. It was talking about the lecture. We always had sort of this side conversation going on. And she passed me a note that I realized was the answer to the question he was asking. Nobody could get it, and she was sitting there quietly. So I wrote her back, I'm like, raise your hand, say something. She says, no, and we go back and forth. So finally I did what any reasonable law student would do. I raised my hand. And I made her point. To which Professor Blum said, excellent, Ms. Robinson. That is a brilliant insight. And for the rest of the class, he referred to the Robinson insight as he discussed this concept. It did not go over very well at home. So fast forward a couple of months. We were in Professor Mike McConnell's regulated industries class, and it's a similar scenario where there's a complicated issue on the table, and nobody's raising their hand, nobody seems to be able to get it. Marcia passes me a note, I think it's brilliant, I think she's got it. I say, raise your hand, she says no, so I raise my hand again. Thinking I'd learned a lesson, but you'll see I learned the wrong lesson. So I said, well, Ms. Coots points out that, and then I proceed to deliver the brilliant point, thinking, this is great, because now she's going to get all the glory, I'm not going to get in trouble, we've gotten the point out there. To which Professor McConnell looks at me deadpan and says, well, you can tell Ms. Coots that she is on the wrong track. And he spent the rest of the period talking about the Coots misapprehension, which he used as a foil for the real answer. So that didn't go over well either. Now, you might think that the lesson that I'm going to try to get you to learn from this story has something to do with my boorish behavior. And there probably are lessons to be learned from that. But actually, the main lesson I want you to learn from this is that it was Marcia's fault. And it was Marcia's fault because she had insights to offer, right or wrong, and she wasn't sharing them. And what makes this process work, what makes your legal education tick, isn't lectures from your law professors standing behind a podium. It's the Q&A, it's the back and forth, it's the interaction. It's the bad idea that half the class has that gets responded to by the professor when somebody shares it. And so, don't be Marcia. When you haven't thought, don't be shy about sharing it, even if it's wrong, because even if it's wrong, your classmates are going to learn from that, and that's what you're here for. Now, one of my law clerk, who's actually not able to be here this morning, but was here 4 years ago, said, you know, that's although that's well and good, but and 90%, maybe 95% of the class needs to hear that message. There might be 5% of the class that doesn't really need to hear that message, and might need to hear a slightly different message. So, to you, my message is don't be me. Right? You can tell from these stories that I was one of those people who just couldn't stand to let a moment go with a question unanswered. Even if it wasn't my own answer, I'm raising my hand, giving somebody else's. If you find yourself being that person, you might want to dial it back a little bit. I think that my classmates would have benefited greatly if Marcia had raised her hand more. I think they would have been fine if I'd raised my hand a little less. The third thought, and the last thought, but it's a long thought, that I want to share is really the most important, and I think it builds on some of what you've heard this morning. And in order to tell you the story I want to tell, I have to give you a little bit of background about my own biography. So back in the early 90s, 1993, or 1994, I had the opportunity to begin working with a small group of people, including a law partner, to advocate for the freedom to marry for same-sex couples in Vermont. Now, this was at a time when in most states in this country, this is at a time when the majority of the states in the country, you could be fired from your job for being gay. There was no state in this country and no country in the world that provided any kind of comprehensive protections for same-sex couples. And the idea that we were advocating was really considered folly. Most people, both within the LGBTQ community and beyond, sort of rolled their eyes or laughed or thought that was cute. So in that context, we began working. We spent about 6 years doing grassroots public education, church basements, living rooms around the state, Rotary clubs, that kind of thing. And at the same time, partway through that period, Susan and I, along with Mary Bonato from Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders in Boston, represented 3 same-sex couples in a lawsuit, challenging Vermont's denial of marriage licenses to 3 same-sex couples. That resulted in 1999 in kind of a mixed decision. It was groundbreaking in that it recognized that Vermont's existing laws denying same-sex couples the ability to marry were unconstitutional. But the court stopped short of ordering the state to issue marriage licenses and instead said that the real problem, or at least the problem it was addressing in that decision, was the denial of the legal protections that accompany the legal status of marriage. And it basically put its mandate on hold to give the legislature an opportunity to explore ways to deliver those legal protections, including the possibility of what you might call a parallel structure for same-sex couples. In 2000, that then resulted in a quite heated debate in the Vermont legislature around what ultimately became a civil union law, which was both groundbreaking in that it provided more comprehensive protections to same-sex couples than anywhere in the world at that point, yet disappointing in that it fell well short of our goal of full marriage equality for same-sex couples. Spent the next 9 years advocating, doing all the same stuff we've done before, traveling around the state, speaking, lobbying, and ultimately building towards a legislative strategy in 2009. And the Vermont legislature became the first legislature in the country to pass law allowing same-sex couples to legally marry without being compelled by a court to do so. And it did that over gubernatorial veto. All of that is background to tell you about my friend Rick Hubie, my late friend Rick Hubie. He represented Londonderry in the Vermont legislature in 2000. He was a Republican representative. And when the vote came on the civil union law, and what the civil union law was it basically created a new legal status, and all the state law protections and obligations of civil marriage applied to that status, but it was limited to same-sex couples. And so for many, it was viewed as marriage by another name. That was kind of the intent. So there were a lot of folks who opposed it on the grounds that any recognition of same-sex couples or support for them would be a bad idea. And Rick Hubie was among those in 2000. Now, it's important for me to know that Vermont Freedom to Marry Task Force, our core philosophy was that there are very, very few truly bad people. That Vermonters are overwhelmingly people of goodwill who want to do the right thing, who, like the rest of us, are muddling through this life trying to do right. And so when people didn't support what we were advocating or even actively opposed it, we worked very hard. We trained our volunteers to hear difficult messages and to have those difficult conversations without compromising the respectfulness for the people who were speaking. We found that most of the time, underlying the hurtful statement was some real issue, real concern that we actually all shared, and by actually listening and engaging and responding honestly and openly but respectfully, we could often bridge those differences, and people would soften and would give them things to think about, and would give us things to think about. So when Rick Hubie voted against the civil union law, we weren't happy. We didn't throw a party for him, but we also didn't vilify him. We kept the lines of communication open. We continued to be respectful of him. We didn't call him a bigot. We didn't insult his intelligence. We just kept plugging away at him and every other legislator but he became a leader within his sphere of influence and exercised vital influence that enabled us to get the job done. He cast what was essentially the critical vote. I mean, you could say that about any one person because we overrode the governor's veto by a single vote. We didn't have any to spare. Without Rick Hubie, we wouldn't have gotten it done. That's also true, by the way, of Senator Kevin Mullen, who also voted against the civil union law in 2000 and then voted for the marriage bill in 2009 and became one of its most outspoken advocates. Now, the reason that I tell this story is because it's a stark reminder that today's adversary could be tomorrow's ally, and that the key to winning hearts and minds is to keep those lines of communication open and respectful and civil and honest. And that can be very hard. We live in a world where we all bring very different perspectives and life experiences and attitudes and upbringings. And sometimes it can be exasperating. Sometimes people will say things that are really frustrating. Sometimes people will say things that make you want to make fun of them. And I suspect, just from what I've seen and heard this morning, some of you are here because you're exasperated. You see what's happening in the world, and you want to do your part to change it, and I commend that, and I have no doubt that this is going to be a group that's going to help move our country in a positive direction. But I ask you to keep in mind that I've never seen anybody change their mind or change their behavior because they were persuaded by the incivility with which somebody made the opposing viewpoint. The way that you're going to succeed is by both listening, because all of us have something to learn from people with different perspectives, and by being respectful in the way that you communicate with one another. As budding lawyers and policy professionals, that's our job. That's in our DNA. We are professional conflict resolvers. We are professional communicators and bridgers of gaps. We understand the complexity of the challenges that face our society, and hopefully we understand the goodwill of all the different people who come to the table, even when they behave in ways that don't feel very good-willed to us. So I ask you to remember that, and every time you engage in discussions here in the law school, to keep that in mind. Don't retreat into the bubble of like-minded people. And, you know, frankly, we live a little bit in a bubble of like-minded people, so you have to make a particularly strong effort to get out of that bubble and to hear the voices of people who have messages that are hard for you to hear or that you just disagree with and that are wrong. Hear what they have to say and also share your experience honestly and openly and respectfully, because we're counting on you all to put it back together for the rest of us in the years to come. So that's my advice to you. I wish you the best. I know everybody's cold, so I'm not going to keep going. Is everybody cold? I'm cold. But you're at a great law school. You're surrounded by great people, great faculty, and I look forward. You know, it's a small state. I'm up in Montpelier, but our paths will cross, I'm quite sure, in the coming years. So I look forward to seeing all of you. So congratulations. I'm supposed to administer the oath. Okay, so I think if you can't stand, you probably should. Okay, can we stand for that? This is the Vermont Law School Oath of Professionalism. Raise your hand, and we're going to do this wedding style, so that means I'm going to say a few words and then you say them back to me. I joke because if you ever get sworn into the Vermont bar, it's like a page long. And it's not really something you can do wedding style, but the chief started doing it once, and then I think he realized a couple lines in that it was a bad idea, but it was too late. This one's short and sweet, so it works wedding style. I pledge that I will uphold the highest standards of academic excellence, honesty, professionalism, and integrity. In my academic and my professional life. I will treat others with dignity, respect, and courtesy. I commit myself to zealous advocacy. For justice. And to ethical service without prejudice. I probably should have thought about where the divides should be along the way. That's your oath. That's your oath. And congratulations.